Hey guys, Effie here. Today I'm going to make this holiday card using our Holiday Love Poinsettia cluster stamp and our new fresh linen background stamp. I started off by inking up our stamp with our Smoky Quartz dye ink, which is our mid-tone gray ink. After I stamped my A2 size panel, I heat embossed our Holiday Love Poinsettia cluster onto some watercolor paper using our rose gold embossing powder. For my watercolor paper, I'll be using some Canson XL 140-pound paper. Prior to any embossing, I made sure to use my anti-static powder tool on my paper panel to make sure that the embossing powder does not stick everywhere. So once I've inked up the stamp, spooned on my rose gold embossing powder, I hit the whole thing with my heat gun, melting all of that beautiful metallic powder. Next, I'll be doing some wet and wet watercoloring using Ken Oliver color burst. So I'm going to start off by wetting the petals with some clean water first, and then I start dropping in bits of the peony pigment into the inner corners of my petals. Then I'll take a second clean fine tip water brush and I'll pull that color out to the edges of all of my petals. This is my base layer of color, that peony pink. Then I'm going to add a little bit of orchid to the inner corners of each petal, and this is going to give my poinsettia a little bit more dimension because we don't have just a straight up pink poinsettia. Adding that orchid and blending it out a little bit into the peony is going to give my holiday bloom a little bit more depth and dimension. I really love mixing different colors, or rather glazing colors over each other, because that way we have more dimension. It's not just one color. You have a little bit of that pink going on in the background and then a little bit of that orchid. I did go back and I added more concentrations of pigment into the inner corners of my petals, and I did that for both the orchid and the peony color burst, and this is just going to add a little bit more shading and depth. Once I was finished watercoloring my petals, I went ahead and watercolored my leaves using a combination of turquoise, cerulean blue, and lime green color bursts, and I kind of just blended the three colors as I applied them to the leaves. Then I went ahead and colored in the smaller blooms using the peony color burst, and for the rest of the leaves and foliage in this cluster I use turquoise color burst. For the smaller images in the cluster, I stick to one shade of color because they're small and you don't really have a lot of room to work with to add multiple shades of color. So I just stuck with the one color and I kept it simple. Once I finished painting my cluster, I expedited the drying process by applying my heat gun to the panel, and then I die cut the image using the coordinating die. However, it wasn't completely dried, so when I applied that purple tape over the painted image, and then once I tried to peel off that tape, it kind of ripped a portion of the leaf, but I fixed this by just going over that ripped area with some additional paint, and my cluster is as good as new. You can't even tell that any portion of my cluster was ripped or torn or whatnot. So next I'm going to take the second die from our double stitch rectangles large die collection, and I'm just going to die cut a panel or a stitch panel from some white cardstock. And I'll just save that outer border piece for a future project. Next, I took the largest die from the same die collection and I just added stitching to the edges of my fresh linen panel. Then I temporarily assembled my card to stamp my sentiment. I'll stamp my sentiment using the same Smoky Quartz dye ink that I used for that fresh linen panel. This way the sentiment matches that background and we have a cohesive project at the end. After I double stamped my sentiment, I started assembling my card for the finalized project. So I adhered that fresh linen panel onto a top folding A2 base, and then I popped up that white stitch panel using some dimensional foam tape. Then I additionally popped up our Holiday Love Poinsettia. Once I have a good amount of foam tape to support my Holiday Love Poinsettia, I went ahead and embellished my card using our silver dewdrops, and I just used 3 and I applied them onto my card using some Ranger Multi Matte Medium in a visual triangle. For the last step of this project, I'm going to add a pop-up poinsettia inside my card base using our pop-up poinsettia standalone dies. For my larger petals, I'm using some pink paper, and then for the two smaller petal clusters, I'm using some dusty purple paper. And I'm using a combination of the pink and purple because I wanted to reflect the colors that I use for the Holiday Love poinsettia cluster that is on the face of my card. I've assembled this die collection before, so I will link that video in the description box below. That video is a bit slower and I give more details as to what I'm doing. So I just sped up this video a little bit so that you're not sitting here for half an hour. So once I've glued the centers of my pop-up poinsettia, I'm just going to cut in half my leafy layer, and this is just created from the largest die from this collection. And after I tucked or nestled it into my pop-up poinsettia, my card is now complete. I hope you all enjoyed today's project and video, and I hope I provided some additional inspiration as to what you can do with our stamps and dies. So if you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel because I update it on a weekly basis. So thank you all so much for stopping by. I'll see you next time.